And I think one of the best ways to prevent that up and down is to keep masking, to require masking. And then we can have a better certainty that as little transmission is happening as possible in the situation that we've got. We can reduce the transmission with the masking. And I think that we can reduce yo-yoing and up and downs if we stay with requiring masking.
You know, the data doesn't show that. And let's just do some comparisons, because we have our school that has, our district has followed the Eastern Idaho Public Health recommendation of a mask mandate until our last board meeting. And then when they took it off, we continued it. We have it till it expires today. But if you look at our neighboring schools, for example, Rigby and Madison, who don't wear masks in their schools, based on what you're saying with the yo-yo effect and spiking in cases, if we were to remove the mandate, they haven't experienced that. They haven't seen that. The data doesn't show that if you don't require a mask, that all of a sudden there's going to be a spike, or there's going to be a yo-yo, or there's going to be drastic increases. Because if that were the case, we would see it in Madison School District, and we would see it in Jefferson School District. And according to the data on Eastern Idaho Public Health's website, when you can scroll down to individual cities, it's not there. They're no different. Their data is no different than our data here in Idaho Falls in Bonneville County.
Can I add
Sure.
one perspective that I think we don't know? And this is purely anecdotal. I don't have any data, but Rigby and Rexburg both have significantly more schools, bigger schools, and better schools than we do. And so I don't know where the social distancing comes into play. And even in 93, I think that they have, again, more schools, more space. And so I think that's where I kind of get caught up, like, okay, you're not wrong. The data does show that, but I don't know if we have everything's equitable. That's my concern, is that I don't know that our facilities and our schools and what we're dealing with is equitable across the board. And that's where my concern comes in, is that we know we don't have the ability to social distance in most of our classrooms. And so if we start pulling too many parts all at once, I worry that it's going to unravel, and then we are going to be back at yellow or something, and that's my concern.
Yeah, and I understand your point. It's valid. I guess I would counter that with saying they only have one high school in each of those towns, in Rigby and in Rexburg. And I do think their school is larger than ours, but they're also 5A. They also have more students in that school. I don't know what the square footage per student would be in their school compared to our school, but we know there's only one high school. We know that there's more students in those schools than what we have in our schools. And like I said, I just look at the data. I want to be clear. I'm not against masks. If people want to wear masks, I think they should have the right to wear masks. Let them wear masks. Their prerogative, fantastic. I just don't feel like it's our role to mandate a mask. Give people a choice. If they want to wear a mask, wear a mask.
So I feel like with the little kids, especially if their teacher doesn't require masks in their classroom, because we have talked about whether or not the teacher would require a mask. And I feel like if a child was in a classroom and they need to, for their family's health or their own health, if that child needs to wear a mask and their teacher doesn't require it, I feel like the child is not going to. Because kids do what their teachers tell them to do.
Well,
that's what we want.
That's a what if situation.
Well, it's a
But
big
I
what
think
if
we're going to have
situation
too
that's
many
realistic.
what ifs if we don't have just.
If there was a parent that was that concerned about their health and the situation, if they have compromised people with compromised immune systems at home, and they sent an email to a teacher or called the teacher or went to the school and met with the teacher and said, will you please make sure my child is wearing their mask during the day? I'm certain that teacher would help out and help.
That's just adding another layer to what we're already asking of our teachers. I think Larry's information that he gathered before the last meeting was very telling in that 16 out of the 18 schools wanted to continue masking. It's
Schools
what
or principals, Larry?
principals,
The principals that I spoke with.
It's
Right.
so it's the principal, so that's just 18 people.
but it's not.
They're not virologists, they're principals.
And,
None of us
and
are.
we aren't either. And the CDC is recommending at all phases of schools reopening, no matter what community transmission is like, to continue masking so that you can stay in school. If our goal is to educate our children in our district and keep them in school now for 5 days a week, which I think is fantastic, then I believe that masking universally, when you cannot maintain social distance, needs to happen for our best effort to keep the children in school.
Laura, how often has the CDC been to our district?
You know what? The CDC doesn't visit any school districts.
Exactly,
So-
that's my point. They are creating regulation.
No, you
for the
interrupted me,
entire
Paul.
country.
You interrupted me.
Go ahead.
Please do not interrupt me. They make recommendations for the entire country based on their knowledge and their understanding of what is best for everyone. And they don't need to visit our school district to make recommendations for everyone. And they currently have recommendations out that with the current level of transmission in Bonneville County, that we should be in hybrid for the elementary schools and virtual for middle schools and high schools. And we're not following that. But I do think that we should follow their request and their recommendation for masking. I'm done.
So you want to pick and choose?
Yes,
what
I
you
do.
wanna follow and
Yes,
what
I
you
do
don't
want to
wanna
pick and
follow.
choose. Because I think you might have a point, Paul, that we want to pick some things that are best for our local area. But some things might be best to follow the recommendations of the doctors. And I don't think that picking and choosing is a bad thing to try and make the best decisions possible.
Right, and what my point is that CDC is making a recommendation for the entire country. They're looking at the worst case scenarios that you're seeing in New York and Los Angeles and so forth. And they're having to make a recommendation for the entire country. That's my point. And we're Idaho Falls. Our situation in Idaho Falls, thank goodness, is very different than what is taking place in New York and Chicago and Los Angeles and Oregon. And so when you have this agency that's making a recommendation for the entire country, they're going to take the most conservative route because they have to consider what's going on in New York and LA.
And you know what,
That's
Paul?
not
I
Idaho Falls.
actually agree with you as far as whether or not our schools can be open. And that's why I said we can pick and choose, because we know our district and whether or not we think we should be open for in-person learning or not. But masking is a thing that the doctors and the scientists